Hey everybody, this is Dan.
And this is Ron.
And this is a nominee, and we're changing it up this week. Ron's wearing a hat, and I'm not wearing a hat. In case you notice that generally I wear a hat, and then Ron doesn't wear a hat. If you could hear that over the radio.
Here. Can you hear the hat? It's the conservation of headwear.
So we watched one of the things we've been saying we were going to watch for months at this point. I think we mentioned it on the show once or twice.
We started in June or July. We may mention it, and almost once a week it comes up like, oh, maybe we should watch this time.
And we did it. And anyway, so what we're talking about is the Alexander the Great pilot from YouTube said it was from 1968. I sincerely doubt it was actually made in 1968 for a couple reasons, but it's definitely from the 60s, and there's not a lot that's noteworthy about it except that the three leads, or sort of leads, two of the leads and then one of the bit players are John Cassavetes, the sort of spiritual godfather of the American independent film movement, and he won an Oscar too, as a supporting actor Oscar, I think.
But not for this.
Not for this, no. Although, if it was actually released in 1968, he was only 1 year away from the Oscar, I think. Or it might have even been the same year, because it was for Dirty Dozen, which was either 68 or 69.
This was 63, by the way. I just looked
63, yeah. This had to be, yeah.
That makes more sense.
So, John Cassavetes, William Shatner, a.k.a. Captain Kirk, a.k.a. master of the spoken word novelty record. He's sort of like the Elvis of not singing, to me at least. And Adam West, who is the best Batman, for my money. I don't know. Something about Adam West just as Batman just like pulls my pork, you know? Unfortunately, nobody's really given much of anything to do. It is a really interesting, I guess plot summary is William Shatner plays Alexander the Great, took over half of the known world, I think. I mean, he took over like a huge landmass.
Known by him.
Yeah, and died at a very young age. John Cassavetes plays Coronos, who is, in this telling of the Alexander the Great story, is kind of like Starscream on the Transformers cartoons. He just like has a hard-on for killing Alexander the Great so he can take over the Persian army. The Greek army, excuse me.
Yeah. And the Persians are practically at the Greeks' doors, and so Alexander has unified all of Greece and protecting it, but he's also headed further east. And Coronos wants to stop that, head back to Greece, and keep Greece fortified. Forget the rest. Alexander wants to conquer the world.
Right.
So even though he loves him, he wants to save Greece.
And Adam West is just kind of there.
Yeah, and he's loyal. He's loyal to Alexander. He's loyal to William Shatner. But yeah, he has maybe one spoken word, which is unfortunate. It needs more Adam West.
Everything needs more Adam West.
Yeah, and Family Guy got that right. So Adam West, rest in peace.
Yeah, and
forever in our hearts.
And I guess this movie, the plot's not really that interesting. The cinematography's not really. It just kind of looks like a long version of the Gorn battle from Star Trek. If you don't know what that is, like pause the podcast, go on YouTube, and enjoy yourself some William Shatner beating on a dude in a lizard suit.
Yeah, type Gorn, G-O-R-N. That might be enough. Might need to add Kirk fight. Gorn Kirk fight. Yeah, and that's it. So it's the Gorn episode is filmed at the Vasquez Rocks, which is in California, and it's famous. It's this outcrop of rocks that are some of them are at this 45-degree angle or whatever. So there was a tiny little bit in here that reminded me of it, but we didn't see the rest. So I don't know if that was just.
I mean, it was definitely shot at one of those, like, everybody shoots their thing where you got to be around a bunch of dust and rock scenes there.
Right. How many Westerns had at least one scene filmed there?
Oh, yeah, like the wide shots in a Western, because, like, the most old Westerns, yeah, they'd shoot the wide shots in a completely different area, and, like, anything where you're just looking at somebody's face or an exterior of a building was definitely a studio backlot outside of, I mean, I'm sure there were probably exceptions, but by and large, financially it makes a lot more sense to just redress the back lot over and over again, and then send the star and the cameraman out to the mountains.
Cheaper than taking all the equipment and crew to and cast to Wyoming.
Right. And so I feel like what's sort of interesting about this is the wide variety of acting styles we see, the incoherent editing of multiple takes so that there's no emotional continuity between people speaking to one person and then the other person responding. And you get because Adam West, William Shatner, and John Cassavetes are all incredibly distinctive actors. But for very, very, very different reasons and with very, very different methods of trying to do this stuff.
Right. They each have a method. Well, actually, we didn't see Adam West's method that much because he only had the one line, and so much depends on how he talks.
And Adam West and William Shatner, I always felt were spiritually very similar as actors, I guess. And as kind of their careers took very similar trajectories, where most of their work that they did after their big defining piece, both of which were on at the same time, like the 66 Batman and Star Trek, definitely overlapped for at least a year or two.
I think Star Trek was 67 to 69, and Batman was how many years?
It's 66 to 69, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah. So they would have been on at the same time after this pilot aired, obviously. And the rest of their careers, they have been playing kind of postmodern, exaggerated versions of their own affects.
Which was exaggerated to begin with.
Yeah. Because William Shatner doesn't really believe in acting. I feel like he's the anti-actor. Because in this piece, you have a lot of people trying to do that sort of gruff continental accent that is just sort of how people tend to perform. I'm an ancient Greek person, but I'm speaking English clearly, etc., etc. And William Shatner does not change his voice in the slightest bit. He sounds exactly like Captain Kirk or T.J. Hooker or Denny Crane.
Is that the guy on the lawyer show?
Yeah, Denny Crane is his character on Boston Legal, yeah. And
it's not just called The Lawyer Show?
No. And then John Cassavetes was he took a lot from method acting, but also was ideologically at odds with the Lee Strasberg style of method acting and had his own fairly complicated ideas about how acting worked, and those came through more in the films that he actually directed. If this was in 63, then he was probably in the middle of directing his second to only film that had direct studio involvement, and definitely the worst film he ever directed, called A Child Is Waiting. And you can kind of tell that he does not want to have... you can kind of tell none of these actors want to have anything to do with this after the pilot. They want to get the money for the pilot and make sure that this does not get picked up to series, because the writing is terrible, the direction is terrible, the editing is terrible. It's pretty much all terrible, but... Excuse me, but... And
it's boring from the third minute or so. Or, it takes us a few minutes to realize that we're already bored.
Yeah, and it's not... There's, it's it reminds me, you ever been to Four Corners?
No.
It's an artificial landmark when you're going through Arizona.
Four Corners.
Yeah, it's at the beginning of Plain Songs, but nothing's actually there except 4 states technically line up at this one point.
Yeah. What do you mean? It's the joint border.
Excuse me, yeah. And that's kind of what this movie is just 3 points meeting, and there's not really a whole lot else going on.
No, it's anything that's interesting about those 3 points or the 4 states.
Mm-hmm.
There's none of that interesting stuff, none of the defining characteristics, none of the any reason you would want to visit there is at Four Corners. There's nothing there except that marker. So in the same way, we've got 3 actors here with very distinctive styles and a lot behind them, and they leave that all behind behind when they enter the set.
Yeah, and you can tell like Cassavetes, because I mean Cassavetes, he did a lot of terrible movies to fund his own movies. Because he kind of saw like the work for hire stuff as being very different than the stuff that he directed, and so he would end up working for God. I mean, he was in so many terrible movies because he would just need money, and then he would end up in some really weird movies too, like the there's that remake of The Tempest with him in general, or not remake, I guess version of Shakespeare's The Tempest with him, Molly Ringwald, and Jenna Rollins, where there's a bunch of like singing goats, basically.
Whoa.
That's a weird movie. Maybe we should do that one later. But and I mean, he did do some great TV work in the 60s. Unfortunately, most of it is buried in the Paley Center, which used to be called the Museum of TV and Radio. I saw a lot of it when I was in college. Probably the best TV thing he ever did was a one-man play for Canadian television. He didn't write the play or direct any of it, but he just turns in this very good performance as like a radio DJ in the middle of the night who finds out that his wife is leaving him, called Flipside. If that ever becomes available, we might cover that. But
oh, cool. Yeah.
As far as I know, you need to go to the Paley Center in New York or Los Angeles and specifically request it to see it for now. There's also like a hidden movie he directed. I don't believe he wrote it. He might have written it. It was an episode of Bob Hope's Chrysler Theater called In the Pursuit of Excellence. That's also like unobtainium unless you get to the Paley Center somehow. And frankly, I watched it. Was not very good.
But you've seen it.
I have seen it, yes.
So, wait, two things I want to note. So three things, I guess. So one is, all right, sounds like we need to take the podcast on the road, go down to the Paley Center and watch some stuff. Maybe they'll let us record there. No, probably not the last part, but at least.
Yeah, I mean, I'll have to see. That place is great. And maybe they because when I used to go there when I was in college, you could only take out 2 tapes from the archive at any given point. And then you'd have to sit and watch them on these like little Trinitron monitors that they had in a room. And they would just be like 2 tapes, because they literally, it's just VHS tapes in the basement, so they'd have to send one of the employees out to specifically grab the tapes you wanted to look at, and then they just pipe them to the monitor. I believe they've digitized a lot of the stuff that's there, and that must have been a monumental undertaking because there's like 250,000 hours worth of stuff in there. But yeah, I could show you. I mean, some of the stuff has come to light that was like really strange that I saw when I was there. There's an unsold pilot for a show called Medicine Man starring Buster Keaton and Ernie Kovacs. Buster Keaton is in red face the entire thing, which is kind of unfortunate, but dude needed money in the early or late 50s, early 60s, because he had not really been, he got screwed out of a lot of the money that the movies that he made in the 20s had made. He never was as popular as Chaplin or Harold Lloyd, so there wasn't as much money to begin with. And he also broke his neck doing one of the stunts in Sherlock Jr. and had a terrible drinking problem after that because nobody figured out. You can see it it's like in the film. There's a water tower that collapses. The water hits him on the head, and he had a spine injury that was not diagnosed for at least like 10 or 15 years. So he was drinking to self-medicate a lot.
That was before opioids were big, or
not? I mean, opioids. You could get opioids, or you could get actual opium. I think heroin existed. I think heroin was invented in like the early part of the 20th century as like a super painkiller.
Oh, okay.
But drinking was considered much more socially acceptable.
It might have been cheaper, more readily available.
Right.
So the 2 notches I made 2 notches up in the air, and one of them was plot. So we need to finish the plot, even though there wasn't much of it. So Koronos, he wants to actually kill Alexander. Alexander has disappeared for 5 days. Darius is camped not too far away. Alexander's disappeared. They try to capture him. He manages to escape, and then they have And he says, I want to go attack Darius. And they go and they fight the Persian army. Coronos turns on the Greeks a bit, and then Alexander ends up killing him in a really terrible sword fight. And I don't know, do we see Darius leave? Because the Persian army, at least the phalanx or whatever that came out there is all destroyed. But Darius, I don't remember seeing him killed or running away.
Yeah, well, I don't think Adam West would have had basically no negotiating clout. So I'm sure if this went to series, we would have seen Adam West in the entire series.
No. Adam West played his buddy, his loyal sidekick.
Which one was Darius?
That's the king of the Persians, the larger
old guy.
No, the larger guy. With
the guy with the crazy the painted macaroni on his face, basically pretending it was a beard.
Yeah, it was somewhere between, I don't know, how do you describe it?
Well, I said it was like, it was like either an offensive representation of an Orthodox rabbi, an offensive representation of Jamaican dreadlocks, or like a bunch of kindergartners spray painted some macaroni on a string and put it on his, or like those, you ever have that string candy where it's basically just like Smarties with a hole in them on a string? Yeah, basically he's wearing that spray painted black is what it looks like.
Okay, that is the best. And one of the downsides of this not getting picked up, because it was a pilot.
It was a pilot for TV for sure.
So one of the reasons it's unfortunate it didn't get picked up is that all the men are basically wearing short skirts. And of course, William Shatner's as Alexander, he has the shorter skirt of all.
And yeah, if you ever wanted to see William Shatner actually dressed as Zap Brannigan from Futurama, this is for you. And we get some almost like upskirt shots practically of William Shatner when he's walking out of some of these buildings. There's some man panty going on there.
Anyways, the other notch was John Cassavetes. So who is John Cassavetes?
John Cassavetes is, basically, so the American independent film movement as we know it, there's some films that roughly follow some of the guidelines or I guess stylistic traits of what would later become the independent film movement, as opposed to the avant-garde film movement, which was largely a very different kettle of fish, and the two didn't really overlap as much as you would expect.
When you say those terms, I'm thinking of them as being the same thing, but I don't know anything about that.
So the independent film movement, a lot of times, Shadows by John Cassavetes is named as being the quote-unquote first American independent film. That's patently not true, but he's the first guy who kind of kept it up and kept making these films on his own terms with his own money, and trying to go after this form of film realism that was antithetical to what Hollywood was doing at the time. The earlier examples that I can think of are Lionel Burgozen's On the Bowery, which I think was 1948, which is half documentary, half realist drama about these alcoholic bums on Skid Row. Also, The Little Fugitive, which was by Ruth and Morris Engel, who you may have heard of. They were fairly famous as still photographers, but it's a movie about this kid getting lost in Coney Island for about for an hour and a half or so.
Okay.
But Shadows is definitely and it's kind of funny because you see the avant-garde independent film divide in the first screening of Shadows, because the thing that opened for it was this kind of beatnik goof film called Pull My Daisy, featuring Allen Ginsberg and a couple other people, and I think Jack Kerouac actually shows up in it.
Oh, cool.
Directed by Alfred Leslie. I believe you can find copies of that on YouTube somewhere. But it's
Wait, I suddenly thought about what was the name of the murder movie recently that came out with who do you say, Allen Ginsberg, Jack Kerouac? Wasn't it those folks? They all went to school together, or 3 of them went to school together, 1 hung out with them, and somebody murders someone.
Oh, man. Well, there was the James Franco, Allen Ginsberg movie that came out a couple years ago, but Ginsberg and Kerouac, I don't think, I mean, they knew each other because, like, they would hang out with William Burroughs. William Burroughs used to live down the street from Jack Kerouac, and they would kind of riff on stuff, and that was part of what formed the prose aesthetic of the beats.
I think that's what I'm thinking of. And there was here. In 1944, Kerouac was arrested as a material witness in the murder of David Kammerer, who had been stalking Kerouac's friend Lucien Carr since Carr was a teenager, etc. This is a brief from Wikipedia.
Right.
Okay. Anyways.
Yeah, so...
you were talking about...
Oh, yeah, so the first screening, Pull My Daisy, it's like... very academic, very playful. There's a lot of concern with like what is art, but there's not a lot of concern with like, oh, we want to kind of show the realism of documentaries, but with a script. It's kind of playing word games. It's sort of, I mean, it's not on a technical level with Nabokov, but there's the same kind of like playing games versus engaging with the world directly. And there's a place for both things. But a lot of what distinguished the early films of the American independent film movement as opposed to the avant-garde film movement of like, Kenneth Anger or Ken Jacobs, Bruce Conner.
Bruce Conner! I know who Bruce Conner is. From like episode 4 or something. Anyways.
Yeah, and I love Bruce Conner's stuff, but we're seeing it, or the independent film movement, I guess, would be narrative films. Sometimes they would use improvisation. A lot of Cassavetes films, and he kind of encouraged this misconception. People would claim they were improvised. They weren't. Most of them were very tightly scripted, but the form of the dialogue is so kind of loose, and he's the least precious director in the U.S. cinema, I guess. Like you don't get the sense he'll purposely misframe a shot if he thinks it looks too pretty and it's going to bring you out of the film emotionally. The dialogue, anything where it sounds like it could be cut into a movie trailer is cut out. It sounds like real people talking. They're not very eloquent. They can't necessarily they're articulating themselves the way that people would articulate, but they're not articulating themselves like particularly eloquent people. There's a lot of people talking over each other. There's points where, like, if he shows 2 people talking in a bar, you can't hear a lot of what they're saying as if you were in an actual bar, because frequently he would just go to a bar and shoot the thing, sometimes with real alcohol. Actually, very frequently with real alcohol. And as a result, his films do not really look like, even to this day, like the stuff that was taken from the lessons that other directors took from his films, I think kind of avoid a lot of what makes them so distinctive, but also what makes them so, like, they're commercial hard sells. They're not emotionally comfortable. They're not distance. They purposely try to avoid any ways in which you can intellectually disengage yourself from them, right? When I showed Elizabeth the Podguest, A Woman Under the Influence, which might be my favorite Cassavetes movie. It's definitely up there. In the entire first hour, it's a movie about a woman with an undefined mental illness being committed, and then her relationship to her husband and their children, basically.
While she's in the hospital?
No, you never see her in the hospital. There's just like a 6 months later placard after she gets out of the hospital. And for the first hour, Liz is asking me all these questions like, oh, what kind of mental illness does she have? Oh, is this like a commentary on this thing or a commentary? And the thing is that the only way to really appreciate the films, there's kind of a zen going on, right? Like the thing that I love about his work is that he looks at the world as it is and without really cutting corners and embraces it. Like a lot of times when you see a film and it's purportedly about, you know, an unpleasant experience or the person's life, they'll cut corners so that it doesn't look like they hate everyone in the film. Because if they just sort of told it their way, it would just kind of look like they hated everybody. Or they were just like whining. And with his movies, you're in this incredibly, like, this weird space of... And, like, honestly, it makes people really uncomfortable a lot of times when I show them these movies, because he's not judging the characters as the... he's not making points about the characters. He's just sort of observing behavior. And, like, you can tell he's very engaged with it, and that's what I think makes it so engaging for the viewer. But at the same time, if you're looking for, like, oh, okay, here's the standard cinematic language that tells me I'm supposed to like this person, or like I'm not supposed to like this person, or this person represents this abstract concept, none of it's there. So you're just stuck in this position of almost like you were meeting people in real life. Like you can't quite figure out everything that's going on. He'll purposely leave out plot details if he doesn't think that it's relevant to the emotional content of the film, which is a thing that Maurice Pilote, the French guy, he would kind of replicate that later, where he'd write a full-length script, and then any scene that didn't resonate with him, he'd just cut it, even if it left plot holes, because the plot was the least interesting or important point of it to him.
So, So, okay, this is going to sound like a total insult. Maybe it is. No, this isn't based on watching a movie of his, but based on your description. How is that different from a mediocre writer who barely knows how to hold a camera? He
does barely know how to use a camera, you can tell. Like, and that's kind of, and he's suspicious of the camera.
Okay.
And like deeply suspicious, and he'll cut off part of somebody's head on the frame, anything where it's supposed to look pretty. And I think the best example of people kind of misappropriating or misunderstanding his style later on would be like a lot of these quote-unquote slice of life independent films that have come out over the last 20 years, where Moonlight's the one that's coming to mind, but you have these like fake documentary shots, the camera's handheld, but it's clearly supposed to look beautiful. The colors have been graded, and you're supposed to have a specific feeling about the characters, so you're kind of judging them versus engaging with them. And to Cassavetes, that was a form of escapism. Like he's sort of trying to drop you in the woods and make you find your own way home. Anything like his final film, or the final one I'll acknowledge, there's like one that he did for money right before he died with Peter Falk called Big Trouble, but he got kind of put on that late in the game, and he didn't write it. It's not really a project that he was deeply engaged with. But Love Streams, his final like independent film, I guess. The two main characters for a full 45 minutes, we can't tell if they're ex-lovers, brother and sister. They went to school together. Like, we literally can't tell what their relationship to each other is, despite the fact that we see them interacting like for a very large portion of that first 45 minutes.
Okay. This is, by the way, you started talking plot, and I thought you were back to Alexander, and like, wait, I don't remember this particular coupling. I mean, it made sense about the two guys. What was their relationship? This being that this is Greece or anywhere, but especially ancient Greece, and what we know about Alexander. But anyways, you were saying.
Well, yeah, and he wants to bring you. I guess if there's a moral to the movies, it's that you can learn a lot by forgetting the fact you know things. When you approach the world from this perspective of, I know this thing, I can point out this thing, I can point out that thing, and I'm like very guilty of this a lot of the time. It's a very, I think your brain's kind of wired for it, right? Like you want to cut the world into digestible, chewable bites. But what he saw as the general purpose of the cinema was to kind of force you out of that for a moment and kind of make the world seem like a bigger, more unpredictable and mysterious place without using kind of cheap emotional triggers or events to do that. And I guess in that sense, he's kind of like Ozu. Like, he refuses. You're never going to see, like, somebody die in one of his movies.
Okay.
Except Killing of a Chinese Bookie, and that's just because, like, you can't have a movie called Killing of a Chinese Bookie without the guy killing the Chinese bookie. But even that movie, it's ostensibly like a crime movie, but he hates the idea of suspense or, like, mysteries.
Wait, so what does he like?
So
you've described all the things in which the movie is not, or what it undermines. What does it overmine? No,
right, or like there's never going to be a naked person. There's never going to be. He refuses to work on a symbolic level, I guess, is what it is. So he's removing symbols and trying to replace them with complicated depictions of behavior. Whereas I think a lot of other films, you'll have sort of Frank Capra is a great example of this, right? Like, It's a Wonderful Life. Jimmy Stewart represents the quote-unquote common man who is forced to make sacrifices for the sake of community. His wife and kids represent the sort of upsides of the community, the same way that, like, Pottersville represents the negation of the positives of the community.
Okay.
And the angel represents the his internal doubts about himself, or Citizen Kane, right? The Rosebud represents.
Wait.
Kane's
Everyone who doesn't want Citizen Kane spoiled for them, cover your ears. And how many seconds are we going to get
that's
this one?
become like that's the new running joke on the podcast, right? Because the old one was What's Her Face is the best part. Heather Matarazzo is the best part of the Princess Diaries.
Paul Rudd was the best part of the Princess Diaries too. I think Angela Lansbury may have been. I don't know.
Like, our new running joke is just every episode we're going to spoil Citizen Kane for you.
We almost did. We were actually we were just interviewed right before this by Sherry, who hosts a podcast called Your Podcast or Mine. It's really fun to listen to. It's fairly new, in which she
very fun to be on.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to be on. She interviews people who do podcasts, and they're all kind of stuff. Probably about half of the podcasts were music related, but then there's other stuff, like there was another movie one. There were a couple that were either individual or long-running stories. I know one was science fiction. I can't remember what the other one was. Anyways, stuff like that. So we got to be on it too. And we almost spoiled Citizen Kane on it.
Yeah, but Hell's a Pop and beat us to it.
Yeah.
They spoiled Citizen Kane in 1941.
So should I give a few seconds for you to spoil it?
Rosebud is...
No, that's not what I meant. I'm going to cut that out and we'll redo this. What I meant was, like we did in Hell's a Poppin', we're going to allow 30 seconds so anybody who doesn't want it spoiled for them can cover their ears. Or is that enough time?
Okay, I can do the Citizen Kane spiel without mentioning...
No, you just did it again.
Oh, okay. Maybe I can't. I'm addicted to spoiling Citizen Kane like it was crack or something. But
okay, I'm gonna go grab put a Post-it note on here that says no. I meant I'll put on there what the spoiler is. No, I won't do it. I was literally putting it on the computer now. Anyways, okay, Rosebud.
It's made out of symbolic condensed language. Every shot has a very clear, specific purpose for being there. The fact that Orson Welles is showing Kane's life over this incredibly long period of time kind of forces him to condense cinematic language. That's a lot of why the film's considered a classic, because I don't know how many of them he creates or how many. It's sort of a compendium film of a lot of kind of interesting avant-garde techniques that were being used in shorts of the 20s and 30s, but were never really put together in a narrative film in a coherent way before Kane.
And that's why it's the best American film, if not the best film ever made. Is that right?
Supposedly, yeah. I mean, I do think it's a great film. I don't think it's the best Orson Welles film, even though, but that's another another whole. Do you ever see Lady from Shanghai, the one where he's like trapped and there's like the shootout in the Hall of Mirrors at the end? I love that movie.
No. Oh wait, that sounds familiar. Oh, it's possible that I've seen that scene. As opposed to the whole movie.
Anyway, so like
but we said the reason you brought
we
up
see him
is...
age with like his his second wife, who's the actress. You see them at a table. The table seems to grow longer, and he gets fat and bald.
And that's
like the definition of symbolic visual language, right? Because we, the baldness is a symbol for the fact that he is an abstract symbol for the fact he got old. The table represents the emotional distance between him and his wife, etc., etc. Cassavetes, wherever possible, avoids that kind of symbolic language in favor of having people kind of act out. So, like, the most intense scene in Woman Under the Influence is when Jenna Rollins, who plays her character's name is Mabel in the film, she's being committed. And I think in 90% of other films, there would be, the woman would be screaming, like, "Oh, don't commit me, ah!" And then there would be some kind of Hitchcocky and, like, cut to black as somebody was injecting drugs into her or something. And then we would cut and she would be in the hospital. Cassavetes lingers on the scene for a full 20 minutes. People repeat themselves. We're kind of forced to encounter the thing as it is without this sort of comfort of shortened language and any kind of editorializing, really. Because, like, we've seen earlier points in the film where she's doing things that she's clearly not in her right mind. She loves her kids, but she also is kind of a very odd mother in ways that could suggest that maybe she's not well enough to take care of her kids up to that point. So we're not really sure how to feel about this, except that, like, it's intensely uncomfortable, and these people have these very fluid, shifting perspectives on what's happening as they try to deal with it in real time. And that's not really a thing you see in many other films.
No. Well, so it's funny. Again, I say it's funny. It's not necessarily funny or amusing.
He did a romantic comedy that I love called Minnie and Moskowitz.
No, I don't mean that the movie's funny. What I want to say is you're talking about Cassavetes removing anything that's excuse me, anything that reeks of symbolism, or that's all that left is the uncomfortable behaviors to make, or at least behaviors that we find uncomfortable. On the other hand,
it's like the inverse of a Ken Russell film, right? Because Ken Russell, like, he removes anything that would seem like straightforward, realistic representation and replaces it all with this incredibly complex symbol system to the point that, like, the symbols themselves...
And really exaggerated symbols.
Yeah, really exaggerated symbols, but there's so many of them that you're not really quite sure how to take any of them just because there's so many in such rapid succession. And he's kind of... He's almost the exact opposite style, yeah. Like, if you can imagine trying to get rid of comfortable reference points by replacing them all with symbolic images and, repetitions, motifs, and whatnot.
But so you've got Cassavetes' filmmaking, and then you've got his acting, and I think as you were pointing out that his face and the way he looked and the way he talked, he tended to be cast as villains. You see John Cassavetes.
Oh, and he was great at it too. Yeah, like there's my favorite episode of Columbo. He's the villain on it. I forget what it was called, but he's like this famous conductor who killed his wife. Spoiler alert. But
for a random episode of Columbo. How familiar were people with John Cassavetes, the actor? Like, how often would they have seen him pop up on TV shows like this?
He was very famous. He won. In 1963, I don't think.
All right, but going on throughout his career.
I mean, he was a known entity. Shadows had come out by that point in something resembling wide release, and he had directed his second movie, which stars Bobby Darin. It's not terrible, but it's not one of his better things, called Too Late Blues. And then he would have been in the process of directing or editing his third movie, A Child Is Waiting, which is terrible. Not that those would... He would have been a known commodity quantity. His biggest point of recognition was definitely being in The Dirty Dozen and winning the Oscar, though.
Okay.
And later in his career, like if you were a person who liked B horror movies, sci-fi movies, stuff like that, you would know him because he was in a lot of like weird, like he was in The Incubus, he was in The Fury, which is like Brian De Palma's knockoff of Scanners, and you get to see his head blow up because somebody's like staring at it.
You knew the person who made heads blow up, right? Or was it you knew the person who?
Oh yeah, Steve Lag. Yeah, Steve's a friend of mine. He was the he's the lead in Scanners, and he is sort of the and Scanners was 78, I believe. The Fury was like 81, and I mean De Palma. I'm not crazy about Brian De Palma. He's a guy who really likes sketching out other people's movies. So there's a lot of stuff where it's kind of like Star Wars, where he's looking for this pat on the back because he went to film school, right? Like the Untouchables, he completely steals the Battleship Potemkin baby carriage scene, just to kind of say like, hey, I saw Battleship Potemkin, you know? Kind of the way that Star Wars takes that scene from Triumph of the Will, like shot for shot as it's ending with the awards ceremony. But that's a whole other discussion. Or, you know, like he remade Blow Up as Antonioni's Blow Up as shit. It's got John Travolta in it.
Why would you remake Blow? Actually, forget that question because that can be said for any film. Why did anyone remake that? You could remake Citizen Kane. It doesn't have to be shot for shot. It doesn't have to be, or what was it, Psycho? That was remade shot for shot.
And that was kind of interesting to me because it was literally remade shot for shot, and Gus Van Sant is a guy who like is a very talented. He could have made his own movie. It's sort of like he wanted to go back to film school on the company's dime, but he made some of the best movies of the 80s and 90s. Like I don't like Good Will Hunting, but you ever see Mala Noche?
No.
That's a really great like black and white movie about the sort of like not quite romance between this dude who works at a bookstore and this like homeless Mexican kid that keeps coming through the bookstore.
I've seen Elephant.
Yeah, Elephant's a great movie. To Die For with Nicole Kidman.
That was fun.
My Own Private Idaho is great.
Yep.
Drugstore Cowboy. I mean, he was on a roll until he met Matt Damon.
Jane Silent Bob Strike Back.
Yeah, and he's in there.
Yeah, Counting His Money. Spoiler.
Yeah, like Elephant's a great movie. And Gary, I really like
Jerry.
Jerry, yeah.
Jerry, yeah. Jerry's interesting.
Where they were just wandering around, two guys named Jerry.
Well, we don't even know if either of them is named Jerry.
Right.
Yeah. It's got Casey Affleck, I think.
Yeah.
And somebody else more known. Is it? No,
I
not
think it's Matt Damon.
Is it?
I think Matt Damon's in that one, yeah.
But Casey Affleck is the less well-known one, but that's the one I remember because he was an aunt starring so-and-so and Ben Affleck's younger brother.
Right. Which is funny because, like, Casey Affleck is so much better at acting than Ben Affleck, I feel like. Like, I don't feel like not commenting on Casey Affleck's personal life, which seems like a shit show compared to Ben Affleck's, but, well, I guess I just did comment on it, but whatever. Spoiler alert for Casey Affleck's personal, I know. But, yeah, I feel like everything I've seen Casey Affleck in, he's done he's much better at immersing himself in characters than Ben Affleck is. Like, Ben Affleck, he has a definite presence.
Yeah.
But I don't ever feel like he's done particularly impressive acting, and I think literally anything I've ever seen him in.
He he seems like variations of himself, and that's to say that is inherently bad acting, because that could be. I think Ryan Gosling does a little bit of that. But
and I mean, we're talking about like a thing with William Shatner and Adam West, right? Like, but I think he's playing variations on himself, but his self just isn't that interesting compared to somebody like William Shatner. Like William Shatner, the way that he talks, I could just listen to it for hours and still still not quite figure out how did this man learn how to emote this way.
And then how did he learn to sing?
Right, Ben Affleck, he kind of just seems smug or he seems concerned. That's really the only two modes.
He always has that little almost smirk, and sometimes a full smirk. So full smirk, smug. Smirk that's kind of hiding there a little bit. That's the what was the other emotion that you mentioned besides smug?
Well, he's like smug or concerned, right?
Yeah,
like Argo, he's either like, I'm in charge, I'm the CIA guy, or it's like a long reaction shot of him being like, oh, I'm so concerned for those kids' safety and whether this thing. I hated Argo. Argo's a fucking terrible movie.
I'm very concerned about those. I'm very concerned about those kids. That's why I only have a small smirk.
Right, and I think that's part of why he works, because like Kevin Smith knows how to use him in a movie.
Yeah.
Like he's great in Mallrats because Kevin Smith just saw like, okay, smug asshole that works at the shoe store or whatever, the perfect role for Ben Affleck, and he just like knocks it out of the park. Chasing Amy, you start hitting the limits of Ben Affleck's emotional range as an actor.
And that isn't to say that I believe smug asshole was the word. This isn't to say that Ben Affleck is an asshole.
No, I mean he seems like an okay guy in real life, I guess. Although even when like Kevin Smith was describing that text exchange they had when they got back in touch, like the first thing he says to this guy after he hasn't seen him for like 10 years is, of course you would describe yourself as a king. Like there's kind of a sense of aloofness and distance in Affleck's in his kind of presentation that I always pick up on.
It was a little cutting. It was a little, knocking him down a little bit. But I wonder if that was just the relationship that they had, or the way they always talk to each other. So this was going back 10 years and saying like, hey, going back to, as if, where we left things off, as if nothing's changed. I don't know.
Oh, yeah, no. I mean, and it's not like... I'm not saying any of this is a bad thing, except for the lack of acting range, but...
We're not saying anything about him as a person.
I mean, I don't know him as a person. He seems like an okay guy from what celebrity gossip I've heard.
Ben Affleck, if you want to hang out, we're,
Yeah, I mean, if you want to...
I mean, I don't know that we have that much in common, but maybe we do.
And I think that's why people immediately knew that him as Batman was going to be, like, very awkward, because he seems too much like an actual rich person to be Batman. Like, he doesn't, like, imagining Ben Affleck seeming damaged, like, I don't think he could pull off the, like, having dead parents part. Like, he could definitely pull off being Bruce Wayne at a cocktail party.
Yeah.
He could definitely pull off the kind of, like, Batman sense that he's always the smartest man in the room, but he doesn't have the danger, the menace, or the kind of sense of something bad happened to this guy and he's compensating for something.
And that's part of the reason why Wonder Woman was the best part of that movie.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, except for Heather Matarazzo.
Well, yeah, okay. Heather Matarazzo was the best part of...
Batman v Superman, Dawn of Heather Matarazzo.
Yeah. But it's also not that hard to be the best thing in it. So Wonder Woman... the Wonder Woman part was really fun, actually. So, but yeah, the movie as a whole. Anyways.
I'm trying to think of other... Because, like, Argo was definitely one of my least favorite movies of the last 10 years. Like, or was that 10? That was more than 10. Was that 2008 that came out? For some reason, I'm thinking 2008.
I don't remember. I remember it won Best Picture, right?
Yeah, won Best Picture.
And that was
2012. Okay, 2012. So that might be my least favorite movie I saw in the last 10 years, just because you have the CIA represented as heroes at the same time as the, like, Operation Condor's going on, and they're setting up these dictators in South Africa or South America. Politically, it works as basically a big advertisement for the CIA, and he's lending whatever emotional range he has to humanizing the CIA in the most glowing, favorable terms possible. He's telling this story because it sounded interesting to him, but he doesn't have any interesting perspective or ideas about the story. And it's just like, it's a feel-good movie that is intellectually, politically, and emotionally dishonest, like at a fundamental level.
So I'm looking up his directorial history. Sorry. I didn't realize. I thought Argo was his directorial debut, but
no, he did a Gone Baby Gone
and The Town.
Yeah, The Town.
But his first one, so Gone Baby Gone, is 2007. In 1993, he directed a short called "I Killed My Lesbian Wife, Hung Her on a Meat Hook, and Now I Have a 3-Picture Deal at Disney." 16 minutes, unrated. We've got to find that.
We have to find that. Yeah. Okay.
I don't even want to.
That's like why this podcast exists.
Yeah.
To find crap like that. Like, that's now one of the things, like, my film collecting grail list. Number one, obviously, Jerry Lewis Holocaust movie, The Day the Clown Cried. That should be available in the National Archives within, 10 years, because he put a stipulation, you can't show anybody this until 10 years after I'm dead. Number two, there was a short that was co-directed by Marshall McLuhan, the media communications theorist, and Jane Jacobs, the great urban planning theorist. I forget what the exact name of it was, but I've never been able to find a copy of it. God, what was it? Because this stuff does turn up on YouTube periodically, every once in a while. And then I guess the Ben Affleck 1993.
Yeah, this is.
Although who knows? Maybe you can find that relatively easily now, but I don't think.
You know so much more about John Cassavetes than what we talked about. I think we need to talk about him, watch and talk about another John Cassavetes thing.
Yeah, let's watch one of the ones he actually directed.
Yeah. Not
Woman Under the Influence, Love Streams, or Faces would be. I haven't rewatched Faces in a really long time. I think that would be an interesting one to go back to.
I mean, in fairness to I'm not sure in fairness to what. Mm-hmm. I was going to say in fairness to this show. It's not fair at all. We watched it intentionally, knowing that it might be the worst thing we've ever seen, but we had to see something that had John Cassavetes, William Shatner, and Adam West. I mean, what more could you ask for?
Right. It's it's like one of those rock super groups where you get together 5 guys that are awesome in their own band, and then it just kind of sucks, like the Golden Palominos, or there's a lot of these. The
exception that proves the rule: Traveling Wilburys.
That's true. Although Traveling Wilburys is still not as good as peak era Bob Dylan or George Harrison, I don't think.
Okay, but we end up with.
But no, it's something good. It's something useful, listenable. It's not like a travesty or any of those charity records where it's 18 giant rock stars singing on the "We Are the World" is fucking terrible. It's for a good cause, and I like the fact that they were helping to feed people, but I never put that on versus any other record by anybody who's on that record.
Right. Gotcha. So at the end of the day, this is what I was expecting, with the only exception that I was hoping that Adam West would have more lines.
Oh yeah, Adam West got a short shrift in this, and I would love to have seen. You know what I would love to see is Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, starring William Shatner and Adam West. That would be. I mean, I was gonna say it's impossible, but maybe they could do it with CGI you can have AI beyond the grave Adam West or something. But
Clerks.
Clerks with the two of them. That would be amazing.
Because Clerks is all talking. It's nothing but just speeches, and sometimes speeches.
I wasn't even supposed to come into work today.
Actually, would they play the clerk role, or would they play the Jane Silent Bob role? Oh no, they can't, because even Silent Bob would be talking.
Yeah, right. I mean, if you're getting the two of them, you're hiring them so they can talk, because they have these incredibly. I mean, they're not even really actors; they're just people who perfected this one affect, right? But it's so perfect and mesmerizing. You can just sort of. It's like an instrument more than like a conscious acting thing, right? Because nobody else could have been the 66 Batman besides Adam West.
Right.
But Adam West can't really do anything besides be the 66 Batman.
Gotcha.
Guises, yeah.
Right. So let's say when he's on Family Guy and he plays the mayor.
Right.
But he's still a clueless version of the 66 Batman.
Oh yeah, and he makes outright right. There's the one time when he on Family Guy where he's talking about the real Catwoman was Eartha Kitt or Julie Newmar or I forget who the third one was, but
Eartha Kitt, Julie Newmar.
because I think there's a different one in the movie versus in the series. It changed season to season.
Right.
But anyway, so we should probably, because I got to write down directions to get home, I think. So this has been Anomany. This is still Dan.
And this is still Ron.
And we'll see you all next week.
All right, take care, everyone.